Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is 5 ways the internal revolution could start in America. Now, I've got some interesting comments for you today because I went to Chat GPT and I asked it some questions about this topic, and frankly, I was surprised with several of them. Several I thought were stupid answers, but several of them were very good. So I recommend you stick with us today. Okay, so in case you're not familiar with it, Dmitry Duduman was a Romanian pastor who smuggled Bibles into Romania, Russia for some 30 years, was arrested, put through 5 months of torture, and the angel came to him, told him the year month day was going to exile him to America. He arrived in America August the 3rd, 1984. The angel Gabriel came to him, and this is part of the message brought him. He said that the fall of America would start with an internal revolution. That's our topic today. An internal revolution started by the communists. That's going to be part of it too. Some of the people will start fighting against the government. And the question is, what's going to start that internal revolution? Now, if you haven't read the rest of it, I recommend you pause and read it. This is interesting and fits with our topic. The entire British fleet of attack submarines is docked, incapable of combat. Do you see a problem with that? Okay, so I guess all of the world is expecting America to protect them because we're about the only ones that have the military. We're about the only ones willing to fight any kind of evil out there. And it gets worse. No Kings has now announced a major nationwide protest coming up for Trump's 80th birthday on June the 14th. Okay, you may be saying, well, how does this article have anything to do with this article? Or the smart ones would say, actually, both of those articles do fit together. They do intertwine, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, the first question is, how will the internal revolution in America start? In other words, how have revolutions in the past begun? That's a good place to start. So I looked it up. Vietnam. The communists overthrew the French-Japanese colonial rule. Now, what's colonial rule? It's kingdom rule. In other words, there was a king, and communists overthrew it. Now, how'd they do that? Well, capitalizing on the power vacuum created by Japan's surrender at the end of World War II, a communist revolutionary Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh launched the August Revolution. They seized control across the country, forcing the emperor or the king to abdicate. Okay, so what happened? Communism overthrew, in this case, a kingdom. There's more. Then let's jump to Cuba. Okay, the Cuban Revolution, 1953 through 59, was an armed uprising led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, if that's the way you pronounce that, overthrew the authoritarian regime of the Cuban president. So once again, we have a kingdom, in this case a president, but how did they get overthrown? The country from heavily U.S.-influenced capitalist state was overthrown in a communist republic aligned with the Soviet Union. Communism overthrew both of them. So then I looked it up. You're going to find this real interesting. I went to not ChatGPT, this is Google, as you can see. And this is my question. Now, I've reduced this down here to PowerPoint so it's easier to read, but this is basically word for word. So my question is, please list the revolutions started by students that were wanting communism. It says a few key historical movements and revolutions were heavily driven by radicalized students. What do we see going on right now? Even the ones that are attacking the ICE officers are mostly students. They're young people. Most of the people protesting in America today are students or young people. So the May 4th movement, 1919 in China, was sparked by student protests, anti-imperialists. Now, what's an imperialist? In other words, that's a kingdom. Well, what's wrong with the kingdom? Well, that's the first thing outside of Israel getting rid of no king. The first thing they had was a king. So what we're seeing is communism is what overthrows these other governments. Watch. Directly leading to the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. So what happened in China is overthrown by communists. Cuba, famously led by Fidel Castro and this other guy, Guevara, however you say his name, but it was seeded by radical university students demanding deep socialist and anti-imperialistic reforms. What are we hearing today? Well, it is kind of the same message, isn't it? May 1968, France, sparked by student protests at the university, does that sound familiar, against capitalism, imperialism, and university conditions, bringing the country into the brink of a radical socialist revolution. So we see the young people, but it's not really the young people, is it? It's really the older people that are spurring the younger ones, stirring them up, and then they go out and protests. But the nation's not taken over by the youth. The youth just seems to be the ones that are the, how do you say this, dumb enough to go out and do it, and then communists take over, people in high places. Another one, a Japanese student movement, 1950s and 1960s. In this case, they organized militant, sometimes violent strikes and demonstrations with the explicit goal of launching an abortive communist revolution and dismantling U.S.-Japan security ties. That was when Japan was taken over by, they weren't communists in this place, at least it didn't say it. But let's go on to the next one. So in Greece, they had a civil war, and it was transforming the old Greece into a new Soviet or communist-style socialist state. Same thing. The Saur Revolution in Afghanistan, same thing. So you can see this pattern, the pattern that we see going on in our nation right now. So then I went to Google and asked it another question. So what would cause some of the people to start fighting against the American government? This was the answer. The most likely cause for a faction of citizens in America to violently fight against the American government is a widespread, oh, listen to this, widespread, deep-seated belief that the federal government has become an illegitimate, tyrannical regime that can no longer be changed through peaceful voting. What are we hearing from the people? What are they? They say that Trump is an existential, it's hard for me to say, an existential threat. In other words, if we let Trump go on, he's going to destroy this country. It's the same playbook. There's nothing new under the sun. What they've done in other countries to overthrow the government, they are working feverishly to do in America. And there's more. One, it gives 5 reasons. Perceived legitimization of elections. The sharpest trigger for political violence is the widespread belief that a democratic process is permanently broken. What are we hearing? He's not my president. What are we hearing? We're seeing, the No Kings protests. America is in the early phases, maybe even the middle phases, of an internal revolution. If a large segment of population, this comes from Google. If a large segment of the population convinces themselves that an election was stolen, what have we just heard? Now, in this case, it was mostly Trump saying it. An election was stolen, or that future elections are rigged beyond repair. What are we hearing right now in Los Angeles? Okay, so we saw, I'm going to put it red-blue. Okay, I won't mention names. But in Los Angeles, we saw the governor, the red guy was ahead, and then more of the voting ballots started coming in, more voting ballots, and you would think that if it was legitimate, it would be in the same proportions, just more votes coming in, but it's not. The mail-in ballots seem to all be blue, and so now the red guy is now in second place, and he's about to be in third. And then when you go to the Los Angeles mayors, race, the blue lady was ahead, and then the red guy was in second. But now the red guy's slid to third because all of the mail-in ballots are all blue. Well, the large percentage of them. So has America lost confidence in our voting system? Yes. Have we lost confidence in our government? Yes. Now, I think that Trump has brought us a lot of confidence back, but a lot of people think it's just the other way around. Since Trump's got in, that we've lost confidence. But the point is, we are not in agreement. We are not the United States of America anymore. We are the divided states of America. Let's go on. If a large segment of the population convinces themselves, doesn't mean it's true, that an election was stolen, excuse me, or that future elections are rigged beyond repair, they may conclude that violence is the only remaining option to change the government. This is Google, okay? There's more. Hyperpolarization and existential threat rhetoric. So when a political rhetoric frames the opposing party not just as rivals, but as an existential threat to the nation's survival, way of life, or freedom, it lowers the barrier to violence. That's what we're hearing. We're hearing that the Republicans or that Trump or all of the right, the MAGA people, they're all crazy. They're going to destroy the nation. It's the same playbook that has worked for the communists or the devil over and over and over and over. Citizens who believe their core values, religious freedoms, or culture are under imminent threat or of erasure by the government are the most likely to justify taking up arms defensively. Who are the easiest to convince? Well, those people in college, those people just out of college, or the people that think they're underprivileged, the people that don't think that they're making as much money as the rest of them. Never mind, I don't know a nice way to say this. The race goes to the one that can run the fastest, okay? So you can't complain when you didn't win the race because you didn't run the fastest. Same thing. You can't complain you're not making as much money when you're not as smart or you don't have the education. And you can't just say, well, the other person, I'm just mistreated because I'm not paid as much. Well, maybe you're not paid as much is because you don't sweep the floor as well, okay? I'm trying to say it nicely. Aggressive federal enforcement or overreach. Okay, now we're getting to what I suspect. Historically, armed anti-government sentiment in the U.S. spikes during perceived instances of federal overreach. Federal overreach? Is there any of that going on? Oh, yeah. Incidents that could spark localized or coordinated armed resistance include harsh federal crackdowns on civil protests, or the way we would say it today, the way the left would say it, or harsh federal ICE crackdowns on the illegals. Are you seeing this? We're not just being attacked in just one way. We've already seen of the three, all three are taking place in our nation right now, and it gets worse. Let's go on. Aggressive enforcement of strict new federal gun control legislation, widespread firearms confiscation. In other words, it's saying if they try to confiscate the guns, there's going to be an internal revolution, and most of us, Christians, Republicans, agree with that. Federal intervention or land use disputes that heavily override state laws or local property rights. In other words, taking away the right of fishermen to go out and fish, go out and do the crabbers or whatever they're trying to do to make a living. And there's been some of that. Okay, let's go on. Partisan fracturing of law enforcement or military. I think a lot of that was happening during Biden's day when he was trying to do the DEI. But I have seen now the recruiting go up in our military again. I think that Kamala Harris, had she won, oh man, we would have been in a lot of trouble. We might have already been in an internal revolution. Cause local law enforcement, National Guard units, and factions of the military to side with disgruntled citizens over the federal government. A localized protest can rapidly escalate into a serious armed conflict. In other words, not agreeing with the military. I think this is not an immediate problem, but it could be. Let's go on. Conspiracy theories and echo chambers. Oh boy, this is a big one. Modern radicalization is heavily accelerated by online echo chambers. When citizens are constantly exposed to extremist conspiracy theories, such as claims that the government is actively orchestrating the replacement, poisoning, or subjugation of its citizens. What's that? Hang on, this is important. It creates a siege mentality that can drive individuals or small groups to launch targeted attacks against government infrastructure or personnel. Okay, what's it saying here? Actively orchestrating the replacement poison. You mean like maybe massive arrests? Yeah. My guess is, of these 5, this is probably the one. But see, we're not just being attacked by one thing. We're being attacked by all 5. My guess is that when they start rounding up, there's 500,000 sealed indictments in America. Normally, it's anywhere from 75 to 125 across the 50 states. So when they start rounding, we're not talking about, look at the problems when they're just rounding up criminals. Imagine when they start rounding up people that are very beloved. Some of the people in government, some people in business, maybe some famous singers, maybe some famous race car drivers, whatever it is, famous ball guys or basketball or baseball players, I don't know. They start rounding up some people that are very beloved and arresting them. Woo. All right, there's more. So if President Trump were to send out the military to arrest over 100,000 political, bankers, business people who had rightfully broken the law, could this start an internal revolution? That was what I asked Google again. Here's Google's answer. Yes. An operation of this scale could trigger an internal revolution, a constitutional crisis, or widespread civil conflict. We hear the Democrats always talking about constitutional crisis. This could cause a constitutional crisis. Why? Because that's what they're trying to bring in, regardless of whether the targets had rightfully broken the law. In political science and legal history, an event where a head of state uses the military to bypass traditional courts, okay, see, that's what we're talking about, the massive arrests, it's not going to be done by police officers. It's not going to be done by FBI. My inside information tells me it's going to be military. They're not going to be tried in civil courts. They're going to be tried in military tribunals. That's the reason they have to take them either out onto a boat or, a Navy boat or a Air Force base or Marine base or something. They'll take them on government property where they stand before 3 JAG officers, and it can be a short trial. And it can try more than just 1 or 2. It can try 200 or 300 that have done the same thing all at the same time. And when the gavel comes down and the sentence is handed out, it's pretty much final. They can protest, they can appeal, but it's pretty much final. Let's go on. So it says, in political science and legal history, an event where a head of a state uses the military to bypass traditional courts and mass arrest thousands of domestic, political, and economic figures is known as an auto coup or self-coup. Now, you may be saying, yeah, well, they're never going to have mass arrests. I don't remember the date, but it was 3 or 4 years ago. As I was waking up from an afternoon nap, I heard audible words, 4 words, massive arrests, massive arrests. So in my book, I have a thus saith the Lord. There's going to be massive arrests. And I think that's part of what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to clean our nation up. Let's keep going. Now, ask Google another question. So I said, if President Trump were to send the military to arrest over 100,000 political, bankers, business people who had rightfully broken the law, could this start an internal revolution? The legality and institutional resistance. Under U.S. law, the Posse Comitatus Act generally prohibits the federal military from acting as domestic law enforcement, while a president can invoke an Insurrection Act under extreme circumstances. Using it to arrest 100,000 specific political business elites would stretch the law beyond any historical precedent, meaning that's probably, my opinion, what is going to cause the internal revolution. It went on to say, the military's response. A revolution or institutional fracture could start with the government itself. Military leaders take an oath to the U.S. Constitution, not to the president personally. If the Joint Chiefs of Staff viewed the order as an unlawful command to subvert the judiciary, the refusal to comply could trigger an immediate executive and constitutional crisis. That's the reason we keep hearing the Democrats saying, oh, we've got a constitutional crisis. The courts, the judicial branch, would likely issue emergency injunctions to halt the operation, saying you can't do that. You can't have the military arrest these people. But do you remember in several programs, I read word for word what Lindsey Graham asked the incoming Kavanaugh that was at that time trying to become one of the Supreme Court justices, which now he is one of the Supreme Court justices. And Lindsey Graham asked him 10 questions, 10 specific legal questions. And basically all of the 10 questions said, can the U.S. military legally arrest and try people? And all 10 answers were yes. So Google doesn't know everything. What they said here is not correct. Yes, the president can direct the military to arrest people. Yes, the military can arrest and try and convict and sentence people. I've read it. I'm not covering it right now today, but I've read it. It's there. Number 2, economic collapse and corporate backlash. Arresting 100,000 influential bankers, executive, blah, 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 could cause a market panic. Stock markets would crash immediately, supply chains would rupture, and major financial institutions would freeze up due to a local total lack of leadership. I disagree. According to Jason Meeks, he saw that there was dancing in the streets. He saw a great celebration when there was massive arrest. I've read it many times, and I decided not to read it today, but yeah. So I disagree. I don't think it would just be market panic. Yeah, there might be a little of that. People didn't know what's going on. But I think the rumor is that when this happens, they've got an 8-hour videotape that they're going to play across all radio, TV, internet, everything, 24 hours a day for 10 days straight in a row, showing all of these dastardly deeds these people did. And when people see that, another prophecy said that it would show people the evil these people had done. Now, that's a rumor. I can't prove that, but let's go on here. Also, private resistance. Severe economic desperation can be a primary driver of popular revelations. Try it again. Severe economic desperation can be a primary driver of popular revolutions. Massive job losses, frozen bank accounts, remember Brandon Biggs saw that, and sudden scarcity of goods. What we got, 12 prophecies saying food shortage coming? Do you see how all of this kind of fits together? If you just say one thing, the dollar's falling. But if you back up and you put a lot of these pieces of the puzzle, you would have to say, maybe not all of the pieces of the puzzle are in place yet, but most of them are. We're close. Mass polarization and public backlash. Says governors of various states might deploy their state's National Guard units to protect their citizens. Might. That's not what the prophecies say. Civil unrest. The birth of an absolute dictatorship, potentially triggering nationwide violence, resistance, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. Again, that's not what the prophecies say. Prophecies say there would be dancing in the streets. So the summary is, using the military to bypass the judiciary, arrest 100,000 would fundamentally break the American system of checks and balances, and that may very well happen. It may be that's the start of the internal revolution. The resulting breakdown in legal legitimacy, economic stability, and institutional trust is exactly the combination of factors that political scientists warn can and probably will start an internal revolution. How close are we to that internal revolution? Well, only God knows. But if we want to look at the truth, we can back up and say, boy, it's a lot closer. Now, let me leave you with a bit of positive here. In all of this, God is going to show up. Remember, He told me August the 8th, 2015, Saturday night, I said, Lord, what do you want to say for the message tomorrow morning? And I heard words. I promise I heard words. They said, this is the time of miracles. As the judgment hits, so will my miracles. Miracles like no one has seen, going all the way back to Adam and Eve. You tell them, I will never leave them nor forsake them. I'm going to meet the devil inch for inch, step for step, pound for pound. Everything he does, I'm going to meet him. I don't look forward to the trouble, but I do look forward to it breaking, how do I say this? The will, the resistance, the pride, whatever needs to be broken in a lot of Americans that think they don't need Jesus, they don't need God, they don't need the Bible, don't need church, they don't need none of that stuff. They're doing just fine. But when they're not doing just fine anymore, there's something inside the heart of mankind that makes it start seeking its Creator. And that's when there's about to be a great, massive revival. It's not just revival, it's sweeping millions of people into the kingdom. I want to be there, and you want to be there. Which, by the way, let me conclude with, if you can help us, it's summertime, and it's tough. If you can help us, God has blessed you, and you can help us now, it'd be a really good time. If you have a 401k, an IRA, if you have some money in a pile in a bank or someplace, I think you're risky. I think you're in financial danger. And that's the reason I recommend you call 800-200-GOLD and just say, hey, here's my situation. What do you recommend? Also, if you're thinking about getting crypto, we'll send you to prophecyclubcrypto.com. And I want to talk about my new books. I got to thinking the other day, God has really blessed me, i.e. you, because He's shown us two of the greatest questions in all of Bible prophecy. The first big question is He has shown me the secret door. That is one word, the word of first fruits, and that, put in correct order, sets all of the prophecies of the book of Revelation in the correct order. Now think about that. For some 2,000 years, how many Christians have wanted to know how you stick the prophecies of Revelation together? Because they're not in chronological order. If you read it, you say, what? Where's that go? So this book puts the prophecies in order. Now, don't order one for $20. Instead, you get a shrink-wrap set of 5 of them for $35. Secret door, and the back has all of the charts, updated charts. Then, this one is the latest one. This answers the biggest question the church on the globe wants to know, and that is, what is the timing of the rapture? Is it pre? Is it mid? Is it pre-wrath? Is it post? When is the rapture? Well, it all has to match with the feasts, and God showed me the answer to the rapture. Here's what people say. They read this book, they hear me talk about it, and they say, of course. Of course. It has to be this way. It couldn't be any other way. It has to be this way. And a peace comes over them because they finally found the answer. How many times have we heard prophecy experts tell you when the rapture is, especially they're trying to convince you it's pre-trib? Well, it doesn't make a difference, because when the Holy Spirit tells you the truth, there's a peace here. If you want that peace, here's your book. Now, the way this works is, don't get one for $20. Get a shrink-wrap set of 10 of them for $35. But, even better deal, you get a shrink-wrap set of these and a shrink-wrap set of these, 15 books for a gift of only $50. prophecyclub.com. I think it's a great deal. And here's the thing. Like the voice told me, when these prophecies I gave your wife, which are in both books, begin to come to pass, people from all directions will begin to turn and listen to your ministry. You've shown me a vision and a dream of me speaking and organizing meetings in sports stadiums. We are going to sports stadiums. And if you want to be a part of that, if you want to be a part of what God is doing in the last days, then spend $50. Spend it. Spend it, okay? It's worth the risk, okay? Spend it, get the offer, read the books. You know, we sold 15,000 of these books. Not one complaint. Not one email came in saying, you're off your rocker, you got a hole in the head. None. And I guess it's going to be the same way with this one too. Because, I don't know, God picked me to show this stuff. I don't think I'm anything special. I think you're special. I think you're part of what He's putting together, an end-time church working the sevenfold miracle.